Is everyone can see my screen now? Alright, thank you. So today's topic is about the migrations. Migrations, or we call it as upgradations. The word the migration or upgradation is used when you are required to move your SQL instance or databases from one version to the other version. So most probably it will be from lower version to the higher version. And what is the requirement? Why we need to do migrations in real time? It is because let's assume we have 2005 instance till now. It was 2005 instance was uh, introduced in the year of somewhere in 2006 or 2007. So from that time onwards, if any organization is using SQL Server from past 10 years, they have to be in the same version, that is SQL 2005. And as we know that Microsoft has already stopped support for SQL 2005 instances. So if any organization that is using SQL 2005 and if they run into some issues, Microsoft is not going to help them out. It is because 2005 is no more in support group for Microsoft. And at the same time, every time when Microsoft comes up with a new SQL version, they also provide some enhancements and they introduce some new features. So obviously we would be using those new features and enhancements to make our life easy. So those are the two major cases why we require a migration or upgradation. Upgradation word is something like if you're moving your databases from lower version to the higher version, we call it as a upgradation. And if we are moving databases from one instance to the other instance, whether it may be a same version or higher version, we call it as a migration. So in SQL Server, we have two types of migrations. Let me take a notepad. So in SQL Server, we have got two types of migrations. One is instance level migration and the other is database level migration. Instance level migration is something if you have an instance with 10 databases, you would be migrating or you would be upgrading all those 10 databases in single shot. And the database level migration is something like you have the requirement is among those 10 databases in the instance, you are asked to migrate only one database. So that time we go for database migration. So among these two types of migrations, how we can do the migration? In what ways we can go ahead with the migrations? So if we are thinking that it's an instance level migration, if it is an instance level migration, the first method we have is in place migration. As it sounds, we can migrate the existing instance by overwriting it. It's nothing but an in place. You are just overwriting all your old version binary files to the new version. So in place migration, what we do is, let's assume I have a server with 2008 R2 running. I have a server with SQL Server 2000 R2 instance running, and I was requested to upgrade that instance to 2012. So by choosing the in-place migration, what I can do is I can copy the SQL 2012 media file onto the 2008 R2 server. I have only one server, and in that server already a 2008 R2 instance is running. So what I'm doing is I'm copying the SQL 2012 media file onto the same server, and once you copy that file, and you open the setup, we find an option saying that upgrade advisor tool. Let me open and show you. So once you copy the 2012 media file on the same server and you run the setup file, it will give you an option saying that upgrade advisor tool. We need to use that upgrade advisor tool to find out any upcoming issues. You can see here, install upgrade advisor. So once you go ahead with this installation, it will give you some clues like, okay, the requirement is to migrate SQL 2008 R2 instance onto 2012. So what happens once the migrations been done? Were there any possible issues which I gonna face? Or for every versions, what happens is having said that, Microsoft come up with new solutions or new commands, and at the same time they deprecate, I mean they discontinue old techniques. So there might be some possibilities where a command exists in 2008 R2, but that command might be discontinued from 2012. So if that is the case, and if any of your user queries or any of your jobs or scripts or procedures using that command might not work once you upgrade that instance onto 2012. So to find out all these issues proactively, we can use upgrade advisor tool. So once you run that upgrade advisor tool on the 2008 R2 instance, then it will give you all the possible issues saying that, okay, in 2008 R2 you have this command and this command doesn't exist in 2012. So once you get this report, you can, if it is a scripting side, you can always reach out to your developer and explain him that going forward on 2012 this particular command doesn't exist, so you need to find out something replaced command. And once we are good with that upgrade advisor report, then what we do is, let me make a note here, run upgrade advisor tool. And once you are done with this tool and you are happy with the report, then what we do is we start executing the setup file. We go ahead and execute the setup file, and at one place it asks you to select. Let me show you here the setup file. If you go to the setup file, you find an option in setup file itself. If you are intend to upgrade any older version to the new version, we will be provided with an option. You can go on to installation, and you can see here the last option says that upgrade from either 2005 or 2008 or 2008 R2. You can upgrade to 2012 from any of these versions. So in my example, I have 2008 R2 instance, so it's still possible. You can just click it and you can go ahead with installation. At one point it will ask you to select the instance name, and you can just select that instance name and go ahead with installation, and that gonna update all your SQL binaries, and it will bring your SQL instance from 2008 R2 on to 2012. So it would be a very quick migration, and you don't need to change any settings or nothing. Everything will be taken care by the wizard, and your SQL server will be brought up to date. That's a 2012. So you just need to select in setup wizard, select upgrade from your older version. Let's assume it's 2008 R2. Having said that, it seems, as per my explanation, it seems to you that, okay, the migration is very quick. The in-place migration is very quick because we are just trying to run the setup wizard and it's gonna take care of everything. It brings all your SQL databases and instances up to the date. But at the same time, we have some risk factors. Everywhere, if you have a shortcut, at the same time, we have some risk factors. What are the risk factors and what are the disadvantages of going with in-place migration? Obviously, the advantages I make it as it's a very quick process, and at the same time, you don't need any extra hardwares or servers. Okay, it is because we are just overwriting, we are upgrading the existing instance itself. But the disadvantages are the first one. Although it is very good that we are upgrading our instance within a minutes, and let's assume your upgradation was succeeded, and you inform to your application team that you have upgraded your SQL instance from 2008 R2 to 2012, and now it is a time for application team to check the connectivity and the functionality. And if everything goes fine, then you are the lucky person. But if application team raises any concerns saying that we are not able to connect SQL 2012 instance, irrespective of your SQL instance is up and running, but still the application is not compatible, or the application doesn't like the SQL 2012. So in that case, the application team come back to you and say that my application is not going to work, is not working on 2012. There are some bugs I need to check, but for time being, please revert it back to 2008 R2. From application team, they will ask you to revert back from 2012 to 2008 R2. It is because their application is not working. But it is not possible for you to roll back. You can always upgrade your SQL servers from lower version to higher version, but it is not possible for you to downgrade the SQL servers from 2012 to 2008 R2. It is not possible. So you will be in trouble that time. The only thing what you can do is you have to completely uninstall the SQL 2012 from that instance, and then freshly install 2008 R2 instance, and then after you have to restore all the SQL databases on the server which were existing before, and you already know that the login scripts, jobs, linked servers, everything need to be created. So it's a very complex process. The rollback is very complex. Even though you find a very quick for upgradation, but if something goes wrong, you might need to spend some days or weeks to roll back it. So rollback is very complex. So this is all about the in-place migration. Sorry, there is a question from Dinesh. Is there any chances of data loss if upgradation is done? No, data loss will not be there, because once you start upgradation, your SQL services will be brought offline. So as soon as the SQL services are offline, no users can connect to the database, or no one can change the data. So data loss will not be there, but the only thing is if your application is not happy, or if your upgradation gets failed in middle, maybe there could be any issue like your software issue or your disk issue or your OS issue, whatever it could be, or network issue. If your upgradation gets fail in middle, then you are gone. You cannot roll back it. And there's one more question. If you take a full backup of all the databases before you upgrade a version, Yes, obviously we'll be to be at safe side. What are the migration or what are the deployments or what are the changes you do on your production? It is always advised you to take a backup of the database. But even though you take all the databases backups on that instance, but it would be very tough for you to get that instance to a previous state in a working condition. It would be a challenging task. So the other way we can do is side-by-side migration. As it sounds, it's a side-by-side. We already have a 2008 R2 instance server running, and at the same time, during entire migration, we are not going to touch that 2008 R2 instance. It will be up and running and it will be accessed by users. Okay, I forgot one more disadvantage with in-place migration. So the other disadvantage is the downtime. The time the upgrade takes, let's say it takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes. So that time is a downtime for the users. No users can connect to that instance. But in side by side, we have the source server, that is 2008 R2 server. We are not going to change anything on that server. Okay, users can still work on that server during the migration. I mean, till we start the exact migration. So in side by side, what we do is we get a new hardware, I mean a new SQL 2012, a Windows 2012 server. On top of it, we install a SQL 2012 on a different machine. So once we are ready with the SQL 2012 on a different machine, what we do is we go back to our source server, which is a 2008 R2 instance. We back up the databases one by one, and we restore those backups onto the 2012 server. And obviously, before we start our migration, that is before we start backing up our 2008 R2 databases, we need to coordinate with the application team and we need to request them to stop their applications, because we don't want anyone to update the data during the migration. Still, the users, if they want, they can read the data, but we don't want anyone to update the data. So to be at safe side, we can ask the application team to stop their applications before we start backing up our databases. So once we back up our databases, we copy those backup files onto the destination server, that is SQL 2012, and we restore them. And once we restore, the important thing is we need to change the compatibility level of the database. So let me make a points here. So a new server is required. Okay. And then after, okay, I need to make the advantages first about this one. What is a side-by-side migration? What are the advantages you're gonna get this one? So the same thing I have pasted over here. Okay. So the advantages, I can make it as the rollback is very simple. I mean, you don't need to do anything. Rollback is nothing but the application team has to change their connection strings. So in side by side, having said that, the source server, we are not going to change anything, right? So we are just getting a new server, the 2012 server, and we try to back up all the databases one by one onto that destination server. Then after, we generate the scripts for jobs or the logins or the linked servers, whatever you have got on your source server. We generate the scripts and we directly go onto the destination server and we execute those scripts, and the jobs or the logins will be automatically created. And once the migration being done, we go back to the application team and ask them to change the connection strings, because currently their application is pointing to 2008 R2 instance. So we are done with the migration. So we ask them to point their application to 2012. So they change the connection strings at their side and they try to connect to SQL 2012. If they are happy with the connection and if they are happy with the functionality, then that's well and good. But if they notice any issues, or if they are not happy with the 2012, or if the application is not working as expected, then they will come back to us, because they don't know whether you are doing a in-place migration or upgrade migration. They come back to you and say, oh, we can't work with 2012 at the moment. There seems to be some issue with the application side, so you need to immediately roll back to 2008 R2 instance. We don't need 2012 at the moment. We need to work it out. So in that case, the simple answer from your side would be, you can still connect to your 2008 R2 instance. It's up and running. At your side, at a DBS side, you don't need to do anything. The SQL instance 2008 R2 is up and running over there. So you can just ask him to change the connection strings back to 2008 R2 and it should work. So it would be very easy for us in case of rollback. So the rollback is very simple, and at the same time, I don't say there's no downtime, because obviously downtime is required, but a minimum downtime. And the disadvantages, I don't think it is a disadvantage for me, because as long as we are at safe side, we should not think about these disadvantages. It's like a new server is required, because we are doing a side by side, and then after it takes more time for migration. Migration take more time, obviously, because we need to migrate each and every database and their dependents. But this is overall about the in-place migrations and the side-by-side migrations. So any questions on this one? Okay, once you are all right with the in-place and side-by-side migration, then I will go into depth about database level migration, how we do, and what all the things we need to consider in case of migrations. So let's take a scenario that you have an instance 2008 R2 and you want to migrate it to 2012. You already have the SQL instances running on those servers, and you are required to move a database from 2008 R2 instance onto 2012. So what all the things we need to note down before that? And one other thing I forgot here is, in side-by-side migration or in place migration, it is good to take a configuration information. I mean to say, like, what are the settings the instance got and what are the features are enabled on the instance. It is because we know we need to keep the same settings on our destination server as well upon the migration. If the source instance has got a property set to true, then we need to ensure that property is also set to true in our new server. So the one thing we need to note down is, it is always good to take the configuration information of the instance before you go for a migration, whether it is upgrade migration or in-place migration. It is always safe side to get the configuration information. And the easiest way to get the configuration information across the instance is, you can execute a simple system store procedure. It's sp_configure. You can just execute this and it will give you all the properties on this instance, and the minimum value, the maximum value, and the run value. The run value will give you whether that feature been enabled or not. You can take an example like the backup compression. So you can go to the instance, and you can see the compress backup option is checked. So if you go back here, the default is 0, that means uncheck. The maximum is 1, that is you can check. And what is the running value? It is 1, that means this option being checked. Now what I do is I will uncheck this. I will uncheck and then click on OK, and now I re-execute this command, and you can see here for backup compression the running value is 0. That means it's a default, we don't have a compress. So we need to make a note of all these things. We just need to copy this entire output and keep it at safe place. So once you are done with the upgradation, then we just need to compare these things with the new server. So coming back to the database level migration, so obviously the first step would be in real time. I'm going to explain you what happens in real time. Even you can take the same scenario if you were asked in interviews. So we need to make a plan for any migrations as a real DBA, real-time DBA. We need to make a plan. It is not something where you can do in one shot or in single day. So we need to give upfront notice to all the end users who are going to affect with this one. If it is a production, we need at least 2 weeks notice to everyone. And usually all these migrations and upgradations will take place on weekends and especially on Saturdays. Why it is on Saturdays? Because if something goes wrong, you still have Sunday, the time where you possibly you can roll back the things. And obviously for all these production changes, we need to have the change incidents. And in production, it is not something if some user drops you an email and says, oh, DBA, can you please change this one in production? You are not supposed to change it. We need to follow some ITIL rules. For all the production changes, we need to have a change incident to be created. Change incident is nothing but a template where the user or the DBA has to provide the information, right? Like what the change is, why you need to do that, and what benefit you're gonna get it by implementing that change. What happens if the change is not implemented on that instance, and how long it will take you for that implementation, and was there any downtime, or was it get impacted to any other users. So you need, it's just a template that need to be filled out, and you also need to have a plan if that change or what are the deployment you are going to do or what are the migration you are going to do, if it goes wrong or if it get fail, what is your rollback plan. So you need to have all these ready before you create any change incidents. And once you create the change incident, then that change incident need to be approved by the change coordinator. Every organization will have a change coordinator, or we call it as a business manager, or the one who takes care of all this ITL process. He will go through your change incident ticket, and if he feels that you have filled all the required details, then he will approve it, or if it finds something missing, then probably you need to get back to him and sort it out. And once that been approved, then the next stage is the application owner has to approve that change incident, and then only you need to deploy the scripts on production. Unless you don't have any change incident, you are not supposed to do the changes. So before you create any changes, ITIL is something like it's something library, infrastructure library, IT infrastructure library, I guess. It is nothing but a set of rules that we need to follow across the organizations. So as a DBA, we need to come up with a plan for the application. Application team just come to you and say that do we have any option to migrate, or we need to take that responsibility, and we need to coordinate with the application team and say to them that we have got a new SQL Server version that is a 2012 and we have very good features with that version. So if we can upgrade our application to that instance, possibly we'll see a good results. So you need to convince your application team, and we need to keep all our SQL servers up to date with the versions. How we do with if you're carrying a mobile phones, and we possibly more keen about having a Android versions, the latest versions. The same way, we need to make sure that our SQL servers are up to date versions. Still, there are some organizations that were using the 2000 R2. I'm not denying that, but it is always good to be up to date with the versions. So as we need to come up with a plan, so what we need to do is the first step before you start any database migration or instance migrations, we need to ask the application team to stop applications to stop accessing the databases. Maybe possible, having said that, we do those things only on Saturdays. So of course on Saturdays or weekends there will be no user activity going on that instance, but if it is a banking or any healthcare industries, so those databases will be online all the time, but however there will be a minimum load. So the applications need to stop accessing the databases, then after you're gonna take full backup of your database. You will be taking a full backup of the database onto 2008 R2 instance, then copy that backup file onto destination, that is 2012. Once you copy that, the next step is to restore the backup file onto 2012, and once you restore, the next step is change the compatibility level. This is a very important. Once you move your database from lower version to higher version, let's say from 2008 R2 to 2012. So for 2008 R2, the version number is 100, and for 2012 the version number is 110. That I mean the compatibility level. So the databases that are sitting on 2008 R2 instance should have a compatibility level of 100, and the databases that are sitting in 2012 instance should have a compatibility level 110. And what we are doing here is we are moving a database from 2008 R2 instance onto 2012. Okay, so once we restore the database onto 2012, and if you go back and check the compatibility level, that database compatibility level will be still showing as 100. It is because the database was brought from 2008 R2 instance. So we immediately need to change that value to 110. You can just right click on the drop down. So let me show you for any single database here. You can go to properties, and on left hand side select options, and you can see a compatibility level. So you can see all the compatibility levels here. So if you find your SQL database showing 2008 with 100 compatibility, then change it to 110. Why it is very mandatory? Because the time it is in 2008 old compatibility level, you cannot use the database for the new functionality that is available in 2012. Let's say in 2012 the new feature is always on. It's a new high availability technique. We don't have that always on technique in 2008 R2. So what usually happens in real time is we DBAs move the database from 2008 R2 onto 2012, and we forget about changing this compatibility level, and then after we try to configure always on that instance, assuming that the database is in 2012, then it should work, but it won't work. It is because as long as the compatibility level is 100, your SQL treats it as this database belongs to 2008 and it is not eligible to have a always on. So that is the reason it is very important to change the compatibility level if you want to utilize the new feature of that instance. So here it would be from 100 to 110. And once you change the compatibility level, then the time to script out the logins. We might have 100 logins on the instance and we need to script out all those 100 logins onto the destination. So how we can do it? Possibly if there are around 4 or 5, we can just right click on those logins and we can script it out. You can go to logins, right click them, and you can see script login to new query window. So this way you can script out a login and you can execute that script onto your destination. But what if you have around 200 or 300 logins? It will be very hard for us to go and take the script for each and every login, right? So to overcome that, we have a procedure, that is we can use sp underscore help underscore rev login. We can use this store procedure to script out all the logins on the instance in one single shot. And this stored procedure this stored procedure doesn't exist on any instance by default. If I execute this, it says could not find store procedure because it is not a predefined store procedure. We need to create that store procedure. And again, don't worry, we don't need to write any scripts. We can find the entire script for this store procedure in Microsoft site. So let me search for that. You just need to select sp underscore help rev login. So you can see the first link, how to transfer the logins and password. Okay, it seems to 2000. Okay, it seems this is a script for 2000. So let me find it out for the 2008 very outdated version. This will be the first site. Okay, it does for 2012 as well. Okay, so this is a script. Copy the complete script. This script will create two store procedures. So let me get a new query, paste it, and it will be creating two store procedures inside your master database. So one store procedure name is spxrdecimal, and if you just scroll down you can see the other procedure will be created with sp underscore help rev login. So once you copy the script in the query analyzer, you just need to execute them and the two store procedures will be created inside your master database. Now you can execute this store procedure. You can see the output. Once you execute this sp underscore help underscore rev login, we need to, it will script out all the logins that exist on your source. If you have 100 logins, it script out 100 logins. If you have 1000 logins, it scripts out those 1000 logins. So you just need to copy the output, and you need to go to the destination. Let's assume this is my destination. You just need to paste the script, and before you create it, there will be some default logins exist on all the SQL instances like NT authority or NT service. So these logins, the policy, this login does exist on all SQL instances. So better you remove those things, or else it will throw an error saying that these logins already exist. So once you remove those predefined logins, then you just need to click on execute. That gonna create the logins on your destination. So let me try to do it on the second instance I've got here. Or else what I do is I will repeat the steps from the start what we have discussed till now. I will pick up a database called CRM, and my requirement is move the CRM database from this instance to SQL 2012 instance. So I will be, the first step is, as I have noted here, we need to ask the application team to stop accessing the database. So as I don't have any application using this database, so I can just directly go with the backup. So I'm taking a backup of this database onto D drive. Let me check if there are any already files sitting over there. Okay, let me delete this file. All right. It's CRM full backup. So it's done. Now what I do is, assume this is a source server. Okay, now I'm moving this file onto the destination. As I don't have any other server here, so I will be using a different directory. Assume this is a different server, and I'm pasting it here in Adventure Box. Okay, so I have copied the file onto my destination server. Now I need to restore this backup file. So this is my destination instance. So in order to restore, right click on the database, go to restore, select the backup file, so browse the backup file. Okay, I name it the same, it's CRM, and here I need to change the file locations because I'm using a single machine. On my source instance, the CRM database files are sitting on C drive, right? So before I restore the database on this location on the new server, I don't want to overwrite that files, so I'm just changing the file path here. But you don't need these settings if you are restoring on a different server. As I'm doing on a single machine, so I need to do this change. So obviously I will be going with a recovery option. So the restore has been completed successfully. Now once you are done with the restore, then just you need to go and change the compatibility level of the database. So as my test here is, I have restored, I have got the source version 2012 and the destination version 2012. So that is the reason there is no need to change the compatibility level. The only thing you need to change when you are upgrading your SQL database from lower version onto higher version. So once you are done with that, then probably you need to script out. You need to do the same thing for side-by-side migration. You need to back up all the databases and you need to restore them on the destination instance. So once you are done with all the databases restoring on the destination instance, then we need to run the stored procedure on your source. So this is my source. So copy the output and go to the destination instance and open a new query and paste the script. And here, before I execute this one, having said that, there are some predefined logins that exist on all instances. So we need to delete those things. So policy event and T-SQL execution login and entry authority. So this all exist over here. So the policy execution, you can see the policy T-SQL execution, it's not required, it's already there. And then after this login, it's a Windows login, so it's already there. The SQL writer, Windows management. Okay, up to this place, these are all exist, so I have deleted. So only these are the new things that I want to create. So once you remove those unnecessary logins, you can just click on execute, and now you refresh and you notice these 3 logins will be created over here. You can see the test, Venkat, and there's John. So these logins were created. So it might not be worthy here as we are copying 3 logins, but it's really worthy if you are doing in real time, where in case you have to move some hundreds of logins. So once you create those logins, you might ask your application team saying that, assume the John is the user, so I have created his login on the destination instance. Now I need to go back to the John and I request him to check the connection string. Okay, that is our duty. Once we migrate our database to another instance, we need to check with all the possible users to see if they have any connection issues. So even though you have created a login here for either John or Test or Venkat, still you might get questions from your user saying that they are unable to connect. They are unable to connect to your database, but you come over here and see that still the login exists, but the issue, where the issue persists. If you remember the topic of SQL logins, which we discussed a long back, I have explained about the Orphan users, how the login will be mapped with the database user. There will be a SID, security ID, for every database user, and there will be a security ID for every login. So the security ID for the user and the security ID for the login should match. Then only you can establish a connection to the database. So now what happens is, if you are moving a database from one instance to the other instance, the users are part of database. So all the users will come along with your database, and after that we are creating a login separately. Okay, so there would be a chances to get orphan users. I'm not saying 100% you will get orphan users, but there are chances you might get orphan users. So in that case, we need to resolve them. We need to fix those orphan users. So first thing is how we are going to check orphan users. So we can use a simple store procedures, that's sp underscore change underscore users underscore login, provide a parameter saying that report. Execute this query and it will list out if there are any orphan users. I need to change database, that's CRM, and execute it. And we don't have any orphan users at the moment. But if you find any offend users, so let me try to delete any one login and create it separately. Okay, I've deleted a login called Venkat and I try to create it now. So as I'm creating now, the SID for this login would be different, even though I'm giving a same name, login name. Okay, have a login with name Venkat, and if you go back to a CRM database and users, where it is, it seems I have deleted. Hmm. Probably I need to repeat this step again to show you how it looks like. What I do is I will delete this database. Okay, database got deleted, and I will now try to restore the database again. Okay, database got restored. Oh, did I delete the login? Okay. All right, understand now. The Venkat user here, he doesn't have permissions on CRM database, so that's the reason it's not showing here. So I need to repeat this step again with some corrections. I just grant Venkat to CRM database. As you can see here, he doesn't have permissions on this one. So I provide him data reader and writer. And I need to take a full backup again. Okay, backup is done. Oh, where it went? D drive. Back. Okay, I move this file back to C drive. Okay, and I try to restore. Let me refresh the databases. And now I try to restore the database over here. You can see already there is a Venkat login here. Okay, I'm restoring the database. Okay, our database has been restored successfully. Now I will execute this statement. Let me make the font bigger. Sorry, this font, right? Okay, change it to CRM and execute it. And now you can see the orphan user. It says there's a one orphan user on this database, and that is Venkat. It is just because the SID for Venkat login and the SID for the user doesn't match. If you want, I can show it right away. So this is the SID of login, and let me get the SID for user. And this is the SID for user, and you can see both are different. They are not identical. So that is the reason SQL Server says it's an orphan user. So how are we gonna resolve this one? We can go and drop this login and create a login with the user SID, but it is a complex. The easiest way what we can do is to resolve this one. You can use the same stored procedure, that's sp underscore change underscore users underscore login, and the parameter should be update underscore 1 comma provide the username comma provide the login name. So username is Venkat and the login name is also Venkat. So let me execute this one. So once I execute, the orphan users will be fixed. When I say fixed, it's nothing but the SID values for your login and your user will be brought identical. So now let me run the report again to check if there are any orphan users further. No, there are no orphan users now. So let me get the SID values again. So the SID for login is this one, and the SID for user is same. So this is what happens at backend when you execute this command sp underscore change underscore users underscore login with parameter update 1. So once the SID of the user and the login matches, then your orphan user will be fixed. So this is what we need to check. So I make it as find and fix orphan users, and after that, if there are any dependent SQL jobs, that depends on this CRM database on your source instance which you want to move on to destination, so you just need to right click on the job and do script job to query window. And the other thing is you can script out all the jobs. If you think that all the jobs are dependent on the database, then you can script it all the jobs at once. You can do that. You can go to Object Explorer details. Here you can select all and right click and script job. You can create it. It's still possible. But for now, if I have to create a single job, then script it out. I select as a clipboard so that it will be in my buffer cache. So I can go to the destination. So this is the destination. I remove all these things and I just right click and paste it, because I have already scripted out everything into clipboard. So you just need to execute the script, and you can now go back to your destination instance and go to the jobs and check. The job will be created, the backup CRM database. And this is how we need to script out the jobs and dependents. Script out all the dependent jobs and execute them on the destination. And one other thing I forgot to tell you is it comes over here. Sorry, I missed it. It's a very important point. The fifth point that comes is once you restore your backup file onto 2012, there's a new version, you have to run dbcc checkdb. dbcc checkdb with data purity. It is required because once we restore, we need to ensure that the database is healthy and it doesn't have any corruptions. So it is one of the recommendations we need to follow. Whenever we move a database from one instance to other instance, irrespective of versions, you have to run this command dbcc checkdb with data purity. So that by running this command, it will ensure or it will try to find out if there are any errors inside your database. And once you script out the jobs and everything, then possibly you need to create maintenance plan. Obviously, we need to create a maintenance plan to back up the database on the new server. And apart from the backup, we also need to create a maintenance plan for index optimization and also for update stats. For backups and index optimization, it's nothing but index rebuild or reorganize and update stats. So in these are all the maximum steps we follow in order to migrate a database from one instance to other instance. So once we are done with all this, we can go back and ask application team to check the connectivity and functionality. And once they test and sign off, in real time what we do is, if they are happy with the functionality and everything on the new server, we go back to our old server. We go back to our old server and we bring this database into offline. It is because we have migrated this database onto new server and we don't want any user by mistake accessing this database. We don't want any users accessing this database. So that's the reason we bring this database into offline and we keep it for a week or two to ensure that everything is all right with your new version. And if you don't see any issues or concerns from the application team, then after 2 weeks we gonna drop the old database from the instance. So that is what usually happens in real time. So any questions? Okay, you need this notepad file. Okay, probably I need to save it. Okay, I name it as a migration and I upload the same file onto the Google Drive. So it is very important. I mean, one of the major role we gonna have in our real time is the migrations. Not every time, but every often, maybe once in 6 months, or at least we may require to migrate or upgrade our SQL versions. So we need to have some plans on the migration. So this, I mean, I try to put all my plans, whatever I used to follow in my previous experience. So I have put all these things here. So if you still want to explore on this, you can obviously browse some forums to get more information on this one. So any questions before I wind up the call today? And from next class onwards, we'll be discussing the high availability concepts. And we do have a performance tuning, but I want to make it as a last class, the performance tuning. But probably from tomorrow we'll start the high availability concepts. Can't we remove orphan users? How can we remove? It's required. The logins are required. So we are fixing that orphan users. That particular user required to access the database for business purpose. So we can't go ahead and delete those users. We need to fix those orphan users. And just a heads up, I'll be starting out. I will be in journey tomorrow afternoon, but probably I will try to stop at some place and do a session for you, or else I will try to start up quickly and reach my destination before the class times. But if either of the things are not possible, then I will drop an email to you prior to the class time. Okay, guys, if you don't have any questions, I would like to close the call now. Thank you.